Radio's Crystal Adams doing a great job as always. My in-studio guest, Ed Valenti. And I know what you're thinking, how did you get Ed Valenti? Well, I know him, so I called him up and asked him. But Ed Valenti and his partner, Barry Betcher, what year was this when you came up with the idea for the Ginsu?
Let's see. 1975.
1975. And we were just kind of sitting around one day, and somebody calls, hey, I got a railroad car full of knives. You guys want it?
Well, it wasn't exactly that way, but it was a very similar story.
Okay.
I'll tell you the story. I was, well, first of all, I started my broadcasting career here.
At WPRO?
At WPRO. Of course, it wasn't in this location. It was at 24 Mason Street.
That's right, the top floor, 24 Mason Street.
Fourth floor of the
unemployment building, which is convenient in broadcasting because you could just go right downstairs and file.
It was called Get a Ticket Every Day. And on the fifth floor was WPRO TV, which is now WPRI.
In fact, I worked in those studios when I worked for Channel 36 because when they moved to Catamount Boulevard, they gave that to public TV, and I actually worked in. That was my first job, right around 1975.
Wow!
In those very studios.
Anyway, so I started here, and then I went over to run Channel 10.
Right.
And it was at Channel 10 that I had this idea that you could sell something else on TV other than record albums. Because if you remember at the time,
the Columbia record group was very big.
Well, yeah, but even before that, John, do you remember K-Tel?
Oh, sure, K-Tel Records.
It was, every record that's ever been recorded since the beginning of time for only $20, and they threw in a bonus of "Happy Birthday to You."
Yeah.
So anyway, I had this idea that we could sell something other than record albums,
right?
And if I could do that, come up with something like that to sell on TV, I would be able to create demand. Make a few bucks, create brand recognition, make a few bucks, and there was one other one I think make a few bucks, and that's how it started.
Right.
So it was at that point that we decided that we would go on TV, and our first product. Can I talk about my first product,
Absolutely.
which was not the Ginsu?
No,
but it's how we got started. The first product. Was a product called the Miracle Painter.
The guy in a tuxedo.
Guy painting a ceiling in a tuxedo.
One.
You have one?
Well, my mom would every time those came on, my mom would call the 800 number. And they always say, if you act right now, we'll give you two. So I ended up getting the second one.
I appreciate the money, John. I really do. So we were together, my partner and I, Barry Betcher, and we were very close friends, and he ran the AMCO transmission franchises in Rhode Island.
Right.
And I, of course, was at Channel 10, and we developed this friendship. So I said to him one day, boy, I've been thinking about a way to sell things on TV, like products other than record albums and so on and so forth. And all we have to do is find some really good product. And I was thinking about it at the time that we could do it with 800 numbers, which had never been done before.
Yeah.
And we could do it with credit cards, which had never been done before. Because at the time, you had to send a check in to the local box office, like Channel 10, Box 1021, Providence, Rhode Island. So Barry was at the home show, and he saw this guy demonstrating painting pads, and he bought one. Which, John, in and of itself is absolutely incredible. You know Barry.
Yeah.
I mean, Home Depot had this guy on their do not call list. And the only thing he had ever used a brush for was to put some sauce on spare ribs on the grill.
Sure, yeah.
So we bought it. He bought it, and he said, I think I've got the product. And so we put it on TV. And we used the man in a tuxedo because at that time what we wanted to do was create this comedic open where people would look at that and say, what the hell was that? And now, of course, I made advertising history because that now comedic open is called grease copy. You grab people's attention in the first few seconds of the commercial, and then you slide them into the ordering mechanism at the end. Anyway, we went on TV, and Barry's garage was the warehouse and fulfillment center.
Right.
And we sold 1 million product.
Holy cow.
$10 million. Out
of a garage.
Out of a garage in our first year in business. And I went over to Channel 10 and after I had bought a brand new car. I drove up to Channel 10 and I was cleaning out my desk. And my boss said, what are you doing? I said, I quit. He said, why? I said, well, I just sold 1 million Miracle Painters. And he said, I understand. He said, when you sell 1 million of anything, you're in business.
Out of a garage. That's insane. You're like Bill Gates.
Yes, kind of.
Only not as smart.
Exactly. And then my wife, who was very skeptical of the idea, I must say, Brenda, my wife, was very skeptical, said, I don't know, we're doing really well at Channel 10. I had been offered some jobs at RKO General in New York.
Right.
I had been offered some jobs at Westinghouse in Boston. She said, no, this is a crazy idea, selling products on TV, yada, 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 so on and so forth. And when I said to her, hey, we just sold 1 million Miracle Painters and we grossed $10 million. You know what she said? Let's go shopping. and it has not stopped since then.
Of course.
But that was the beginning of the miracles. And we had Miracle Painter, we had Miracle Slicer, we had Miracle Duster. And then came Ginsu.
So how did you, now that's where you got my curiosity up, because I still have a Ginsu knife in my toolbox. I use it for cutting radiator hoses and tin cans.
Well, can I get the knives I just gave you back? I just gave John a set of
Ginsu steak knives.
Ginsu steak knives. It's a $19.95 value. It's available.
Thank you very much.
But only by mail. Anyway, Ginsu was a product that was sold by a company in Fremont, Ohio. They were single-blade knives.
Right.
They were extraordinarily sharp. You know, amid all the smoke and mirror...
You still have to have a quality product.
You still have to have a quality product.
Right.
And this was a high-quality product. But it was sold at end cap displays. And so we decided that we would take the end cap display out, take a whole bunch of knives, put it together, and create something completely different, which would have been a whole set of knives.
Now, was it called Ginsu back then?
No, it wasn't. It was not
You
called
guys
Ginsu.
came up with that.
So what we wanted to do, because in the beginning...
You have to be very careful in Rhode Island, because it could be Ginzo, you know, and that's got ethnic overtones.
That's an Italian, isn't it? Anyway, so what we wanted to do with the Ginsu knife, if you remember back in the old days of Ed McMahon, who sold products on the boardwalk, what we wanted to do, John, was to take that 20-minute presentation, condense it down into a 2-minute commercial, and make it as appealing and as compelling, and make the consumer as willing to part with their money seeing the 20-minute demonstration and as they would with the 2-minute demonstration. So that's where the whole thing came together with But Wait, There's More.
Right.
We wanted to make it an endless offer. Most people will say, Ginsu, I don't know what I'm getting. It's a lot of knives, but it's not a lot of money.
Right.
So there was a lot of confusion about what you were getting. So what we would do is we would say, here's a knife. It can cut a radiator. How much would you pay for this knife? But wait, we'll also give you this. But wait, we'll also give you this, and this, and this, and this. And that's why, but wait, there's more.
Right. Did you have that trademarked?
No, I didn't. But Bob Thompson, pop culture professor at Syracuse University, calls But Wait, There's More pregnant with promise.
It is.
It is. And so at the end of the offer, you didn't know what the hell you were getting, but you knew it was a lot of knives, and it didn't cost a lot of money. And then from there, we started writing other things such as... Not how much would you pay, but wait, there's more. Operators are standing by.
Right.
So you don't forget, order before midnight tonight, which I still don't know what that means.
Because after midnight, I completely erased my brain.
It was those literary classics that became...
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I wouldn't put you up there with Shakespeare, but it's good stuff.
Oh, it was terrific stuff. And it became such a pop culture item that... You know, we started to get parodied on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
John Belushi.
The
Bass-O-Matic. And John Belushi's Samurai Deli. And Johnny Carson, Tea Time Movie. And we were in so many different movies. Ninja Turtles. We were in The Sopranos. We were in Brotherhood. Sleepless in Seattle. And countless movies. But mostly comedians. In fact, I jokingly say that if it wasn't for me, a lot of comedians would have been broke. I tried to claim them as a tax deduction on my return, but my accountant said, I don't think that's going to work.
They always throw cold water on all that stuff.
So that's how the whole Ginsu knife became popular.
Now, the other thing you invented, and I have some personal experience with this, because I started my broadcasting career at Channel 36, and then from Channel 36 I went to Channel 64, back before it was there was a Fox network.
Before there was a Fox network.
And so my job when I worked at Channel 64 was, because everybody worked, I was the promotions director, which sounds like a shirt and tie kind of job. I was also the board operator for the shift from like 4 p.m. to midnight.
Right.
And so what we used to do is we would sometimes not have time sold in a break. So I would just grab a public service announcement and stick a public service announcement in. And finally, my boss came to me one day and he said, John, stop that. Stop what? So stop with the public service announcements. If you've got 90 seconds that's not accounted for in the log, we have these things called PIs. I said, well, what the heck is a PI? He said it's per inquiry. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is when someone sees that commercial on Channel 64 and they call that number, the people who get the call know it came from Channel 64. We get a little something, something. Really?
Yes, per inquiry.
So I started running these PI spots, and we had them all over the place. And you invented the concept of the PI spot because you don't have to buy the expensive television time. Because I would run in prime time if I had a 90-second hole, rather than put like 3 30-second PSAs in, I'd grab one 90-second PI spot and run the PI.
You're absolutely correct. Unfortunately, there weren't that many stations that I could do that with. I would say 98% of all the media that we spent, and in 1 year, we spent about $20 million in broadcast. In 1977, we were the 18th largest user of spot television in America.
Wow.
And that was just in the United States. What we did with the PIs is we went to stations that had inventory.
Right. Because
they had low ratings. And unfortunately, there weren't that many of them around.
Right. It was not like today where you got 500 stations. But nobody was watching Channel 64 back in the day.
Yeah, so it was only relegated to stations that had a lot of inventory and, as a result, no ratings and had a lot of inventory. So it was
it was a vicious cycle.
It was a vicious cycle. But that's how the Ginsu was born.
We'll be right back. My guest, Ed Valenti, the co-inventor of the Ginsu knife. Stick around. We'll be back with more. And we are back at about 4 minutes to the top of the hour. My guest is Ed Valenti. He and his partner, Barry Betcher, are probably best known. And this is going to be in your obituary, so someday. Well, not soon, but the Ginsu knife guy.
I already have it picked out.
What's the?
It's Here Lies Ed Valenti, the man that brought you the Ginsu knife. But wait, there's no more.
There's no more. But yeah, so that is a major achievement. And your legacy lives on. I mean, there's still ridiculous products being sold on the air constantly.
I wish I had trademarked, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
But we were very young at the time.
Nobody knew about that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know about that stuff. But let me also say, before we begin, it's great to be here with you.
It's good to have you here.
It
I haven't
really
seen
is.
you in a long time.
And I'm hoping now that I've agreed to come here that you'll get rid of those photographs.
Well, you were kind enough when I was a state rep. I was one of the few state reps who was media savvy enough to run a television campaign. And you did all the media buying for my television campaign. I was amazed at, because like everyone else, you figure I got to buy media. Well, how do I do that? I call up the cable company, which I don't want to say the name because I don't want to embarrass Cox. But you call up the cable company, and they send you a schedule, and they say it's $3,000. This is what you get. Yeah. And so I said, "Oh, okay, I guess that's what it goes for." And then I went to Ed, and I said, "Does this make sense to you?" He says, "I'll get back to you." He came back, he like tripled the number of spots for the same amount of money, which is because you buy so much media that you have their undivided attention, which is now.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this: I got another half hour. Can you stick around for the second half hour? Because
sure, I'll stay for as long as you want me.
All right,
to,
we're
John.
just scratching the surface because we got to talk about this. And you've got a new book out, which we're going to promote.
Actually, it's an old book that was rewritten. It's called The Wisdom of Ginsu, and it's new because it's now released out last month on Amazon Audio.
Right.
So
you never had a problem like with some guy in like Cambodia calling you up and saying, "Why you lose my name? My name Ginsu."
Actually,
you not pay for that.
Actually, the name Ginsu doesn't mean anything in any language. It's a totally made up name. Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you a story. When we were,
I only got about a minute, and then we got to. We'll only save that for afterwards.
All right, we'll save that. It's a good story.
My guest Ed Valenti, the co-inventor of the Ginsu knife, and all-around great guy, and we're having a great time talking and reminiscing about this. If you got a question for Ed, you can give us a call 438-9776 800-321-WPRO. That is the toll-free number. This is the John Loughlin radio broadcast. We'll be back with more after this. Don't miss. Broadcasting, indeed, we are 12:08. John Loughlin with you on the John Loughlin radio broadcast, where you can call in to be part of the show. 438-9776 800-321-WPRO. My guest, Ed Valenti, co-inventor of the Ginsu knife, has graciously agreed to stick with me for another half hour, which is terrific because we just barely scratched the surface.
We did.
And we'll also promote your book, which we're going to give away. We have 2 copies, right?
2 copies, yes.
2 copies of your book that we will give away. And what is the book about, and what's it called?
It's called The Wisdom of Ginsu.
The Wisdom of Ginsu.
Actually, it's 2 books. 2 books in one, I like to say.
Now how much would you pay?
Yeah, exactly. I always have to give you a little bit of an extra deal here. The first part of the book is... Not the first part of the book, but part of the book is a story about Barry and I, a couple of guys who started with nothing. And unbeknownst to us, were blazing trails, macheteing through the jungle, not even understanding remotely what we were doing,
right?
Which was changing the
way... I do that every day, and there's no money in it at all.
Changing the way people buy products today. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we were the people that created the whole basis for the infomercial by stringing 4 30-second commercials together to make a long-form commercial. But we were the precursor to Home Shopping Network and for the 30-minute infomercial. So the book is a story about Barry and I, and some of the things that we did right and some of the things that we did wrong. And what we call those is Ginsuisms.
Okay.
Life's lessons. If you read the book, I absolutely guarantee, it's a 50-year guarantee, by the way. I won't be around by then. But right, anyway, it'll change the way you think about business. It'll change the way you think about your personal life.
Right.
And there's lots of things that we learned by having that kind of a business. After all, when all is said and done, we did $500 million in sales. So there's a lot of life lessons in there. How to ask, how to get free stuff, how to improve your work environment, how to start a business, how to maintain a business, how to make it more successful if you already have a business. So lots of little Ginsuisms like that I think are pearls of wisdom.
Okay, and if you would like a copy, a free copy of Ed's book on the wisdom of Ginsu, be the third caller.
Autographed.
And you will make sure you tell Radio's Crystal Adams who you are, and we'll have it autographed to you. So you can get an autographed copy of Ed's book, which is terrific.
I'd like to tell you the story, 2 stories in the book that in one of my chapters, it's called Not Making a Mistake is a Big Mistake. And the reason for that chapter is if you're not making mistakes,
right,
then you're not trying.
You're not trying something
You're not
new.
Experimenting. You're not out there doing things. All successful entrepreneurs have made mistakes, but they've made so many of them. But in the end, they've tried hundreds of times to do something, so the amount of failures are small relative to the amount of wins.
Correct.
So not making a mistake in your life is a big mistake.
And I think it's good to make new mistakes.
It is.
You don't want to make the same mistake repeatedly.
No, you don't. That's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, you want to make new mistakes and new and inventive mistakes, and that shows that you're innovating and trying new things.
So let me tell you about 3 mistakes that I made.
Okay.
Number
Coming
1,
on the John Loughlin Show.
What's that?
Coming on the John Loughlin Show.
No. It's always a pleasure to see you. And by the way, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for paying your taxes. I had a ball.
You had to mention that, huh? Taxes. Anyway, three big mistakes in my life. In all the years that I sold products on TV, whether it was Miracle Painter, Miracle Duster, Miracle Slicer, or the Ginsu knife, I always sold them for X 95 cents.
Right.
$9.95, $19.95.
It makes the thing look lower, because in your mind, you see $19.95 sounds less than, I know that's rather obvious, but it sounds less than $20.
It is, but so does $19.99.
Right.
And so does $9.99.
So the 99.
And the difference in the 4 cents, I am sure sitting here today, would have not deterred anyone from ordering.
Yep.
If I calculated on Ginsu alone, the difference of the 4 cents, how much more money we would have made, it's about $750,000.
Yikes.
Yeah. So that was mistake number 1.
Right. But that's a good mistake to have, because that means if you passed up $750,000 in revenue,
you made
a ton more.
I know, but still.
So yeah, don't beat yourself up over that one.
I don't. One of the other mistakes that we made is when we sold our company to Warren Buffett.
Yep.
We sold it for cash, because Warren Buffett now owns the Ginsu.
Oh, okay.
Berkshire Hathaway. He owns the company. In fact, they just changed the name to Ginsu Products, Inc., which is part of that division under the Warren Buffett flag. But we sold it for cash instead of stock.
Oh, well, that would have been Berkshire Hathaway stock.
Oh, it would have been, John.
Yes.
And
this wouldn't be WPRO. This would be Ed Valenti-ero.
I would own the station.
And then some.
And then if you think about back then, the naivete of guys like me and Barry, I thought Berkshire Hathaway made shirts.
Well, they did. They did make shirts at one time. Many, many moons ago. That's how they started, yeah.
So that was the second mistake. The third mistake, which has been chronicled in a book by Ted Turner, who references me. We were doing a lot of business with his superstation in Atlanta,
sure.
WTBS, the superstation. So he called us one day and he said, "Ed, look, I'm gonna do something unusual. I'm gonna ask you to give me $2 million, and in exchange for the $2 million, I'm going to give you $2 million worth of airtime and a percentage of a new business which I'm starting." And I said, "Okay, Ted, what is it?" He said, "I'm going to start a 24-hour news channel." So I said, "Let me get back to you." Mm-hmm. So I went to Barry and I said, "Barry, I just spoke to Ted," because he was very accessible at the time, "and this is what he wants to do." And he said, "Well, what do you think? You're from the broadcast business." I said, "I think the guy's smoking cigarettes that don't have any writing on them." Who the hell is going to watch news 24 hours a day?
You want to hear somebody else who made the same mistake you did?
Who?
The late Glenn Laxton. Remember Glenn Laxton?
I love Glenn Laxton.
I knew Glenn pretty well. And in the early 1980s, he was covering the Von Bulow trial. And he came to the attention of Ted Turner, covering Von Bulow's trial down in Newport and that whole thing. And they said, "We'd like to offer you a job coming to work in Atlanta for this all-news network that we're starting." And Glenn's reaction was, "Nobody's going to watch News 20. What are you, crazy? I'm on Channel 12 for crying out loud."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another story that I want to tell you about is we were on about 700 or 800 TV stations at the time with Ginsu. We had just launched the name. Do I have time to tell the story?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And our creative director, a fellow by the name of Arthur Schiff, who's since passed, God rest his soul, but absolutely brilliant guy, just a brilliant, brilliant guy, came into the office one day and he said, "You're not going to believe what just happened. I just got a call from an irate person at the Japanese embassy. Do you know what Ginsu means?" We said, "What does it mean?" He said, "I'm not going to say it on the air, but it's about someone's mother." I said, "Oh, my God, we're on 800 stations. They're beside themselves." 15 minutes later, he came back in and he said, "I was just kidding." So
what a joke's that.
We fired him immediately and almost completely cut him up to pieces with
Ginsu,
little Ginsu knives. But that's just a very quick story about some of the fun that we had throughout those years. But I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning about the story. The book is on audio tape. I prefer audio tape.
Right.
It's also available in Kindle, and it's also available in a soft cover, which is a cover that we have right now.
Right. And you can still get it on Amazon. I noticed that it is on Amazon as well. Now, the interesting thing is, since you and Barry did the whole Ginsu thing, the entire media landscape has changed. Mm-hmm. So somewhere out there, in my opinion, there is the next idea that nobody's come up with yet. Because right now, we're still bombarded with ads all over the computer and all over our tablets and our smart devices. But nobody's cracked the nut the way you guys had to be able to offer something as compelling as you did and do it in a way that makes sense. There's been a lot of copycats. A lot of people have copied what you did. I think Franklin Mint, all these the companies are just they're everywhere now that use your model on television. But as this media landscape changes, it makes you wonder, what is that next idea? And it's out there. There's two guys in a garage somewhere in Plainville, Connecticut, that have the idea.
I would say yes. I agree with that.
I mean, I don't know what it is, but
I don't know what it is either. I would say that the methodology, the execution of that idea is markedly different today.
Yes.
Because the competition for eyeballs and the competition for ears is so dramatic.
I don't know if you heard it when you were driving in, but I finally broke down and I got one of those Amazon Alexa things.
I did.
And literally, my wife and I were talking about a Thai law jersey that my daughter had thought she left at home. My daughter's studying abroad in Korea right now, and she wanted us to find it and send it to her. And we're talking about, and literally, I open up my phone, and the first thing I see is an ad from Amazon for a Thai law jersey. I mean, so...
Well, I would say that the next idea, I would just want to give you a couple of thoughts from my book, and maybe it'll inspire someone. But the next idea is going to come from a couple of guys in a garage.
Yes.
And it's been happening so much in the tech industry. I have a couple of quotes that I'd like to talk about from my book. And this is a quote from Dale Carnegie in 1937. "Financial success is 15% professional knowledge, 85% in the ability to express ideas, assume leadership, and to arouse enthusiasm."
Yeah.
And I think
from
that's
the book How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Excellent quote. And then two others, if I can. A 1933 memo from Samuel Goldwyn of
Metro Goldwyn Mayer.
Metro Goldwyn Mayer.
Yeah.
This is a memo to the staff about a screen test for Fred Astaire. And this is what he wrote. He can't act, slightly balding, and he can dance just a bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the battlefield is replete with people who missed out on stuff.
So there are things, and then finally, the last one is, Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination. He also went bankrupt several times before he started the Walt Disney Company.
The story I always tell is about my friend Tom Ohanian, who I'm sure you haven't heard of, but you know what Tom Ohanian invented. Mm-hmm. Tom was doing an editing job for me. He was a very, very accomplished, very skillful, what they call CMX editor, which is computerized editing.
Yep.
And after an edit session one day, he said, John, I got to show you this thing. I figured out how to edit videotape on a computer without using tape. He said, look, I'll show you. And this grainy thing, it was awful, and computers are all wired together. And I said, Tom, no one's ever going to edit videotape on a computer. You're a good editor. Put that stuff in a box, put it in the garage, and forget about it. Fortunately, he didn't take my advice, and he ended up inventing the Avid, which is ubiquitous now as the editing platform.
I think the landscape is ripe for someone to do this.
It is.
But I have to say, a couple things. Only in America, only in this country would anyone be able to do that. And number two, you have to have the desire and the need to want to do this. You have to be motivated. One of the phrases I like to use is, there's no way you can sit on your ass and slide uphill.
Yeah. My guest, Ed Valenti. You're listening to The John Loughlin Show. We'll be back with more after this. Stick around. Radio's Crystal Adams, doing a great job as always. Future Radio Hall of Famer. Getting a big thumbs up from Ed Valenti.
Thank you very much.
Now how much would you pay?
Yeah, right?
So, Ed, we were talking during the break, as we kind of close out the hours, a couple of things you wanted to mention about, and it's an honor, by the way, to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
You literally changed culture in the United States because, and you know that, and everyone else should too, but you and Barry literally changed culture. You became a cultural icon. And I don't think people realize it. It's gone way beyond the knife, which I keep in my toolbox to cut radiator hoses and tin cans. Oh, and by the way, my friend Jason, who's a big cigar advocate, in fact, he sells cigars like to different sorts, he wants you to invent a Ginsu cigar cutter that never goes dull.
I'll put it on the drawing board.
But you literally changed culture. You changed the culture of 20th century America, and that's pretty cool.
Well, that's a step up from I interrupt people's television programs.
Well, I mean, but it's it's so pervasive.
Yeah. No,
that
it
really
is.
has. It's changed.
Thank you for
you
that.
and John Lennon. You're in the same sentence.
Well, I don't know about that, but I appreciate those comments. I always, as a young boy, I always felt that I would do something.
But I think every young boy feels that.
Yeah, I tell people in my book as well that I never thought in terms of if. I always thought in terms of when.
Right.
Not if I would be successful, but when I would be successful. And if you think you can, you can.
Right. And conversely, if you think you can't, you can't.
Exactly.
And people tend to be their own worst enemy in that regard.
I'm not that spectacular. Anyone can do this. It's the right motivation and the right idea and the willingness to succeed. And for Americans, what an opportunity. I mean, you could never do this in another country.
But, I can't help but think that for every Ed Valenti and Barry Betcher out there who were able to do what you guys did, there's 100 people who invented, mayonnaise-infused tuna and went nowhere. I know a guy right now who's got a tremendously interesting concept, and he's as dogged as you are, but he just can't seem to get it across the finish line. We'll talk about that at some other point, because maybe you can help him.
Yeah, I'm happy to help anyone who is looking for some help. In fact, the Ginsu knife, when it first went out, was unsuccessful.
Really?
Now, I could have just as easily stopped and said, that doesn't work.
Yep.
But we went back, and honestly, the thing that made the difference was we added 6 steak knives.
Really?
Don't know why, but it worked.
Incredible.
And it was amazing. It was just amazing.
Excellent. Well, Ed, I want to thank you for taking time from your Saturday to join us here on the John Loughlin Show.
My pleasure, John.
And it's always a pleasure to see you, and we wish you well in the future. And
thank you.
What's next? Golf, retirement, that sort of thing, or?
I'm just going to hang out with my wife and kids.
That's a good thing to do. It's good to be able to have the resources to do that. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.